this audio cast, one of the things they said is that I do find that there is a certain deficiency of recorders that just take your signals from the whole desktop and try to capture that and put it into files. And this is something I noticed like 10 years ago when I was using other platforms as well, is that it's really, and maybe I'm just not looking far enough, but it's really hard to find things that capture sounds from your desktop too easily. And I think it's to do with streaming, and they kind of worry that you will be able to easily capture streams and turn them into files. And I think there was a lawsuit around 2004. I remember I was at work at the time listening to it against like Microsoft and Apple, this like multi-billion-dollar lawsuit or something that was going to become a lawsuit over the fact that I think Apple and Microsoft was supposedly enabling people to rip music or to make copies of things. And I'm not exactly sure. To this date, I think this is one of the reasons that the DRM pushes in Apple and Microsoft had to be put as a matter of priority, and Microsoft has actually worked on Vista in 2005-6 until the end of 2006 RTM. They actually did work on putting these restrictions and working with the hardware companies. If you look at the notes of, what's his name, the New Zealand guy, the guy who wrote the Vista defective by design or DRM thing, he basically pointed out in his slides, he showed you some of the material that comes out of Hollywood and how they collaborate with Microsoft trying to put these restrictions in. And it was imposed on Microsoft as much as it was imposed on Apple. I think Apple doesn't get enough flack for it, although Apple puts even possibly worse DRM in their operating system. People don't seem to care so much. Because they choose to buy Apple, they don't just buy a computer and get it with the operating system. But going back to something you said before about bundling and companies trying to upsell or to sell you more merchandise you're not interested in on top of the existing offering, kind of using the channel to increase sales. One of the things you find is you have legislation, and I think in France you have some legislation that prevents you from, or is supposed to prevent you from bundling even things like the operating system and the computer. I don't think it's enforced properly. And one of the things you have in the UK, for example, is the sort of unbundling between the phone companies, carriers, and lines and cables and everything else. Because I think, at least in the past, the exchanges were owned by certain companies, and you couldn't actually get competition going within the phone market, so the prices could be inflated artificially. Does this kind of ring a bell? Or?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very difficult subject because I personally saw the fallout when the homeowner or the tenant was offered the choice in the utilities market. I mean, obviously we had at one point it was only BT, and there was very little choice, and then a lot of phone companies jumped onto the ability to sell you their phone service. And what worries me, presenting too much choice, too much freedom to the end user at one time, chaos ensues. I saw firsthand when 7 or 8 phone companies were all trying to sell you their products. You would get one, and then another one would claim that you'd registered with them. And I think it needs to be a subject or an issue that's approached very, very carefully, because what ends up happening is people go, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And I was one of the ones who was not particularly overjoyed at the browser ballot that was offered to Windows users when installing the software, because I always went off the opinion, well, if people know about choice and they've tried, say, Firefox, they'll be installing Firefox. If they haven't and they're presented with a brand new computer and a ballot, they'll go with the one they know, just through fear of breaking their system when they first get it, or maybe just their comfort zone. And I saw the whole as a complete waste of everybody's time.
Yeah, if you just to hold the thought for a moment.
Yeah.
I was just going to say about the ballot, because I wrote about 10 posts about it and about how Microsoft was cheating the ballot. The thing about it, which almost nobody points out, actually a couple of things. The first thing is, no matter which choice you make, you still have Internet Explorer, right? So nobody really points that out. Maybe you can remove it from Windows if you want to, but Microsoft has ensured that Internet Explorer actually comes with a computer. So it's actually there, but you can choose something else in addition to it. So it's not really fair choice. It's kind of like, well, you can have something else if you want to. The second thing is there is this notion or this kind of piece of spin that comes from usually Microsoft blogs that the European Commission is trying to kind of attack Microsoft for having high market share. But if you look back at the reasons they do that, it's because of the actions they took previously to gain this type of monopoly in browsers, which fortunately they lose. So that's the point.
Well, it's certainly, I think it's a massive subject, and probably one that we'll cover in a separate episode when we've got more of the episodes to dedicate to it. Just very briefly, if there's nothing else you want to add, I want to just run over a quick sort of semi-related link that I got off your Denska that you posted a few days ago. Is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah. It was it's titled 10 popular Windows applications that should be ported to Linux. And because of work restraints, I've been on a 12-day run now for work with no rest days, so I haven't had a lot of time to keep up. This one post was one that I could actually have a look and give my opinion on quite easily. I'm having a look down the list. Hopefully the link for this particular article will be on the show notes when this audio cast is published, so you'll be able to see what I'm looking at. But I'm just looking at some of the titles that have been suggested for the Windows binaries that should come over to have a native Linux version, and maybe not just be dependent on Wine to get any sort of functionality on Linux. A bit of a strange list. Photoshop, I could sort of appreciate why some people would want that, but I wanted to. Have you ever used Photoshop yourself? Have you ever? Are you somebody who's had experience with Photoshop before, Roy?
Probably used it about a few times when I was about 15 or so. I was a Windows user at the time. I think Windows 95, and I think there were a couple of things. I actually used it legally because they had all kinds of trial versions at the time. You have to think back at they were distributing CDs with all kinds of things on them, and it was a trial version if I recall correctly, and I was basically playing with all kinds of font macros, trying to generate nice logos. I actually still have them somewhere if I wanted to look. But what I actually did later, I think the year 2000, I think the GIMP I only started to use when I was about 19 or. And it wasn't very good. At the time it was around version 1-ish, and it was really hard for me to use. I can't do a direct comparison, but the reason I bring this up is you have to remember you have this cliche and you have this stereotype for the GIMP and for Photoshop respectively. You have these glamorization of Photoshop in a picture is like a very famous phrase, and GIMP is like this really terrible word, this terrible application, which actually it's a really good application now, and it's a lot easier to use. A lot easier to use, and it has a lot more function, and the menus are sorted differently now. They changed a lot over the years, and it's actually confusing. If you use different versions, you don't find the things from the previous version. But the thing with Photoshop, a lot of people use it because of the brand and because they work within a corporation that requires it strictly. I think that the file format is no longer much of an issue because, as I understood it, one person, the PSD files, I think they use in Photoshop. It's possible to work with these and without Photoshop now. And as far as, well, I think quite a few people have processes and they have like these sorts of like scripts or recipes for Photoshop. And as soon as you depart from Photoshop, you cannot do your recipes. And if you work on a website and you have those buttons and look in a certain way, you have to follow the same procedure to make them look consistent when you add a new button. So that's a bit of an issue. Yeah. And I think, but people can use Wine to run that, So it's not really required that it gets ported.
Well, the reason I asked, I've never used Photoshop to my knowledge. I might have looked at a trial like yourself at one point, so I never sort of bought into the fuss, into the hype, as it were. So I'm really at a loss to say really what Photoshop offers that GIMP doesn't. I mean, I'm no GIMP expert, but then my graphic editing needs are very, very small, and I'm not a graphics artist at all. So I was just running that one past you because, like I say, I've never seen what the drawer is for Photoshop. Running down the list is the usual Quicken, AutoCAD, Dreamweaver. I would question that one, but we'll leave it.
Dreamweaver. Oh god, you want to